Hello and welcome back to a video. Today I'm doing the 25.8 support tier list. So, draw content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a lot of changes towards the support role this patch. We saw a lot of direct buffs towards the likes of Zerov, Sona, Zoe, Shen, Blitzcrank, Hui, Mel, and an adjustment towards Annie, who has ended up being relatively weak compared to where she was pre-patch, but is going to receive some follow-up changes in 25.9, which should definitely help her, and I believe she will be a better support than 25.7. Alongside that, we saw direct nerfs towards the likes of Yumi and Lulu. Lulu, this is a third direct nerf, I believe, in a row. This champion had been overperforming for a while, and they want to bring her a bit more in line with some of the other options. Let's get into it. So the D tier is going to have two new additions, and that is Annie and MF. I've re-added MF to the support pool. She's not gained popularity by any means. I just felt like there is still an audience around this champion. She does heavily underperform here though still. Her main kind of tools are just not that great compared to other options in the support role, and traditionally she needs slightly better like slow accessibility on her E, or she would need better AP ratios to really be a better and more functional support option. I think with buffs she could definitely be viable again here. Right now though, definitely too weak. Her core isn't amazing. I believe it is a Blackfire into Leandru second, and it's just not there in its current state. In the case of Annie, I've re-added her. The changes to her kit, albeit were powered down this patch, I believe into next patch will be beneficial for support and leave her in a stronger state than she was in 25.7, which is why I've added her as like, I recommend trying this champion at least a bit if you want to play her support. I don't believe will break any like boundaries in terms of like just how strong she will be, but I believe she will be a maybe even B tier option going to next patch with the amount of buff she is going to be receiving. Other options within the D tier include the likes of Malphite, who is still a pretty gimmicky support. Obviously plays around his ultimate Yasuo pairing and just for harass with Q. It's not great, wouldn't really recommend playing it. The other two champions here are, well, I mean, I'll separate one of them from the other. Vega is also remaining as a D tier option. The champion only also really gets paired alongside the likes of Ziggs and is a bit gimmicky, plays around his cage primarily. He is his hard CC tool and hopes he gets enough stacks from continuously battering the enemy with Qs. It's not a consistent way of climbing. It's not a pick I'd really recommend playing. It's like a for fun pick at best. The other champion in the D tier though is more of a difficult option. I don't believe Ashe is a terrible support pick. I think she just has the issues where she requires a really hefty advantage from like laning phase pressure to really translate it into late game power. Right now though, I think she is still slightly on the weak side as a support option, so she does drop slightly down from that, but she is also a hard support to really get value out of, and I'd recommend other options which are going to be more traditional and arguably easier than the likes of Ashe to get wins on. Moving on to the C tier then, we are bumping Mel up. She is doing a bit better in the support role. I still think this champion is slightly on the weak side across all three of her roles. If she was to get buffed, I believe long term bot lane would be probably her strongest role, and then support and mid I could see being like contestable like second role options. Mid I believe will be where they try to balance her for going forward, but support I could see as being a secondary role. I think this champion does have its strengths in the right comps, but is still slightly under the bar at the moment, which is why she still remains as a C tier option. The other C tier picks still remain the same: Amumu, Silas, Renata. In the case of Amumu, this is itemization. I think this champion's very easy to play and has access to great hard CC, but his itemization's weak, and that kind of prohibits him from being a higher up support option. In case of Silas, great counter pick into specific pairings, and if you're very comfortable playing the champion, you can use this pick as a snowballing option in the support role. It gives you a bit more agency and control of the game. If you're not comfortable playing Silas and you're not really able to identify which kind of comps you'd want to play him into, I wouldn't really recommend him. He's a bit niche and you'd only ever really want him as a counter pick. And Renata is in an unfortunate spot where she's pretty pro-jailed by the Kalista pairing. I would like to see some changes maybe to Renata in the future to enable her to be a bit more accessible for the average player, because right now she underperforms in solo queue whilst also being one of the most unpopular supports in the game, and I think it is a very unfortunate spot for the champion to be in. Bumping up from the C tier to the B tier then are both Blitzcrank and Hui. They both received direct buffs this patch, and they both are doing slightly better in the support role as a result of that. In the case of Blitzcrank, he received some Q damage and a passive buff. nice changes to Blitzcrank. They come in, like the buffs come in pretty early on into the game, and again, it gives him a bit more lethal threat, and it gives him a bit more durability within the game. I think he is still slightly on the weak side at the moment, but intentional, because they don't want champions like Morgana, as an example, Blitzcrank to be really popular, but not even really popular, like really strong, because then they will eat even more ban rate than they already do, purely because of their frustration points. In the case of Wei, he received base damage buffs to both his R and passive. They are late game skewed, so it doesn't really affect support that much, but it was nice damage to be added back into this champion's kit. I think he can be a sufficient support option if you want to opt into him. He is a slightly harder to play mage, and I think there are better options than him at the moment in the support role, but he sits as more like a low B tier option in his current state. Some of the other lower B tier picks are the likes of Teemo, who's a pretty niche, low elo skewed gimmicky pick. Tom Kench, who has fallen like quite weak more recently. This champion really has struggled with direct nerfs to his itemization and the champion. I think he could do with a bit of a buff to kind of really enable him to be a solid support option again. Zac has issues with itemization, same for Galio. I think both these champions would be better with other items in the game. I think Rakan is, I mean, the mainstream ones are like your Rakans and Leonas. I believe Leona got buffed this patch, or is it next patch? I'm getting my patch numbers confused. Leona, I think, is being buffed in next patch. She's going to receive a passive buff, and then 2 mana cost buffs. I believe 1 to her Q and 1 to her E, which should be big. It should help the champion. It allows her to look for more angles, and it gives her more consistent like damage output through that passive duration being extended. She does remain as a beta option, though at the moment she doesn't perform as well in solo queue as some of the other options, which I recommend. Same goes for Rakan. These are like the 2 mainstream supports which just aren't as performant in solo queue in their current states. I think Rakan needs Zyre a bit more in his current state. In the case of Seraphine, I think she is a good jack-of-all-trades support option. She's a better bot laner. I think if I recommend you play Seraphine anywhere, I recommend bot lane Seraphine. But support Seraphine is a fine option. You should be able to get good results, and pairs really nicely with the likes of Ashe, who is being buffed in 25.9. LeBlanc sits as a beta option, and so does Zoe. Zoe received a direct buff to her AoE Q this patch. It is nice for solo lane Zoe. Doesn't really do a huge amount for support Zoe, but these champions, if you are very good at playing them, and you're very comfortable playing these picks, can snowball advantages very aggressively. They're not like level bound by any means, which is why they work quite nicely as support options, and I'd recommend giving them a try if you are very comfortable playing picks like these. Swain and Morgana are pretty low elo skewed picks. In the case of Swain, he is a fine option. You just have to be comfortable playing the champion, and I'd recommend playing him into traditionally shorter range compositions where you can get more value out of a kit. Into heavy range, this champion will struggle quite a bit in the support role, and I'd recommend playing him in other roles if you are looking for like more elite skewed translation. In the case of Morgana, she's being buffed in 25.9, and the buffs are sizable. They are early game skewed as well. I think the champion will definitely probably bump up to the A tier with those changes. Right now, though, I think she has the issue where playing support Morgana can oftentimes feel like you're playing 2 abilities, and the rest of your kit can feel kind of lackluster. Her passive wants her to do damage, but her damage is quite low if you're not putting points in W, and her main kind of tool is her E for the spell shield and the Q for the CC, and those are the 2 kind of like things you want to get loads of value out of, and if you can't, then this champion does become quite underwhelming. Brand is weak at the moment, albeit this is the strongest kind of elo where the champion will perform the most. I think this pick could do with being buffed. Just generalistically, I think all of Brand's roles are kind of struggling at the moment, but he does sit as a beta option, as this is the elo bracket where he does perform best in. Pyke sits in the beta. He probably sits as more like a low beta option, if anything. I think the champion's very hard to play and is one of the hardest supports to play in the game. If you're very comfortable snowballing advantages and playing an AD assassin as a support, go ahead. I think you can really get good results out of this champion, and he can be a good way of like really aggressively smurfing and like climbing the ranks. If you're not comfortable playing Pyke, I would not recommend him. He's not a consistent way of climbing. You do have to be very comfortable knowing your lethal thresholds and snowballing advantages and closing out games early, which traditionally won't happen as much when you are playing in lower MMR brackets. Moving down from the A tier to the B tier is Yuumi. Yuumi was doing fine for average play. This is one of the best spots Yuumi has been in post like her update, where they pushed her more towards crit marksman with the like the ratio and like specific like other pairings to really make use of, they were trying to push her away from being able to just jump off a marksman and onto like an AD bruiser in the jungle, where we had like the Xin Zhao and like the Talon stuff like in 2022, I want to say it was. Yumi is, being nerfed. I think it makes sense. They don't want this champion to become overbearing. She eats a lot of ban rate as well. She drops down to like a B tier option. I think she can still work with certain pairings. She's just not as strong as she was in the previous patch. Being bumped up to the A tier then from the B tier are both Shen and Xerath. In the case of Shen, he received a pretty nice buff towards like his utility output. His W had a CD reduction of 2 seconds. His Q blade pass through gained a 10% flat slow. Like compared to, I believe it was 15 and now it's 25 on level 1, and then it goes up by 5 per rank. It's nice. It helps support Shen. It allows him to chase a bit easier. It allows him to more consistently block autos, and I think this is the role where the buffs did the most amount of like movement. Sits as an A tier option. I still think Heartsteel or Deadman's are better than Locket Rush when you're playing support Shen, unless you're very comfortable in your teammates' ability to impact the game and you're willing to give up some agency, in which case you can play the likes of Locket. And I haven't tested Trailblazer or like looked at the data for Trailblazer Shen support, but Trailblazer is a really underrated item at the moment. I'd really recommend trying it on the likes of your Gallios, your Shens, maybe not the Time Kenches. I think Time Kenches 2 Scooter Heartsteel, but some of those like other supports like your Rakans, your Leonas can all abuse this item quite well, and it's definitely worth checking it out and just seeing how you can perform with that item on those champions. In the case of Xerath, he bumps back up to the A tier. I said they would probably buff him again, and they went and buffed him again. It made sense. He lost power, and I believe they were trying to keep him relatively neutral, if not more mid lane skewed. He is doing about as well as he was before the 2 lots of changes in support. So yeah, he sits us back to being an A tier champion. The other picks within the A tier are the likes of Karma, who is just performing fine ever since those nerfs to her Q, the 10 flat damage at all ranks. She's definitely lent more towards the Emax build, where you're playing her more as an enchanter. I think getting that early game advantage of playing as an enchanter does give you a clear condition in the game. I think it's fine. I just think if you're comfortable playing with a champion, you will be able to still get consistent results. If you're not, she's not a pick I'd really recommend, but she's fine to have within your champion pool. I'd describe her as fine. Nautilus is a pretty standard hook champion. He's a point and click CC lockdown pick, which can work in most compositions. There are champions which will counter him if you do blind him, but I think he is one of the more blindable hook options at the moment, and yeah, I'd say he's a pretty solid A tier champion. Alongside him we have Alistar, who's one of the more like performant traditional support options. Him and Nautilus are definitely, like, I'd say a tier above Leona and Rakan when it comes to solo queue at the moment. I think Alistar over time has definitely been doing a lot better. There are items which he can definitely abuse. I believe Trailblazer is actually a very performant Alistar item at the moment, but generalistically this champion's doing decently and has a really good time being able to just commit to engages, and having the ultimate being a really good durability tool gives him a lot of value. Other picks within the A tier include the likes of Elise, who is a great AP assassin within the support role. She is, I'd say, a slight tier above the likes of Zoe and LeBlanc, has great dive potential, does fall off quite aggressively, does need gold to really scale, or not even scale, just like function within the game. But if you get it, then yeah, this champion can still perform really well within this role. If you're looking for like an AD option, I believe Pantheon is still a great AD lockdown, like early game skewed kind of aggressor. This champion can do a lot early with his point and click CC and his base damage. Does struggle later on into the game if you do not give him gold, but yeah, you want to close out early and he should get value. He is an easier option than Pyke, and if you're looking for champions within the same, like, similar vein, then I think Pantheon is a good option to go to. Neeko, I think it's an underrated champion just generalistically. I think both Neeko mid and support do have lots of value. This champion has a great CC tool. Her ultimate is incredibly powerful. Her early game damage is very high. She can definitely push people out of lane, and it can be very oppressive to play against a champion like Neeko. So definitely don't sleep on her if you're comfortable playing Neeko. I think this pick's in a pretty good spot at the moment. Bard. I think Bard is just a very good like support to slot into a lot of compositions. You do have to be good at Bard. I think if you play Bard badly, you can be a detriment to your team. So make sure you put some time into this champion. You really learn like what timers you can roam on. Like, this champion is very macro orientated. Like, you have to understand what you are doing within the bigger picture. Otherwise, this pick will feel probably lackluster compared to some of the other options, but he can be very valuable to a draft, and especially paired alongside the likes of Jin, where you have a lot of like upfront damage. This champion can be very oppressive to play against. Shaco sits within the A tier. This champion, when you opt into the AP build and support, is very oppressive. It can do a lot, especially lower ranks. This pick does quite well on his AP variants. The higher up you go, it can definitely struggle a bit more. People will opt into sweepers, control wards, track you a lot better, and it can be, a bit harder to pilot the pick within those elos. But definitely, sits as a solid A tier option. I think he has access to a huge amount of damage, and the control this champion provides gives him a huge amount of value, especially combined with his scaling. It's very, very powerful. Zillion, a great support to pair alongside champions which value movement speed, and movement speed is a very valuable stat, and that is one of the reasons why Zillion has been able to perform so well over so many years without next to no balance changes. His ultimate is also an incredibly powerful tool, and certain compositions will really struggle playing into him, so definitely a very solid A tier option. Maokai is a pretty standard engage support option. Has good vision tools, has good like the long range ultimate through his through his R. The point and click CC on his W gives him good individual lockdown, and I think he has, as a champion combined with Trailblazer, a lot of value at the moment as an option. Senna sits within the A tier. She's also doing fine at the moment. She's struggles into some of the hooked champions, but if you put her against an enchanter, her utility outputs, her healing outputs, if you do opt into that variation, all very high, and she can definitely have a lot of value in drafts, especially if you are making sure you're getting all the souls you can get access to and utilizing your range early onto the game, especially against some of those more melee orientated support options. Some of the more carry based options are still like your Luxes and your Vel'Kozes. They are, I'll pair Xerath alongside them. I think Xerath is slightly beneath them now with his changes, but still can compete with them. In the case of Lux, her burst damage is very high, her wave clear or like her push is very nice, and paired alongside certain champions, she can definitely get a lot of value. In the case of Vel'Koz, he got buffed not too long ago, and the buffs did wonders for him. It enables him to be a very oppressive support option. Also really wants to push for like early game harass and poke to force people out of lane and kind of like builds up an advantage through that. I think all these picks can give you a bit more agency within the role. Milio and Soraka are great enchanter options. They sit towards the high end of the A tier. And I was going to have Sona alongside them, but I think Sona with the buffs has actually kind of superseded them, and I think Sona sits as an S tier option, which I'll talk about in a moment. But Soraka, great traditional enchanter healer option. In the case of Milio, he's a bit more orientated around specific pairings, but if you pick him with the right champions, this champ has a lot of value. His ultimate is also an incredibly powerful tool against certain compositions. So things like Lilia Sleep, for example, Milio is great into because he can cleanse the drowsy. Other picks within the A tier are some of your defensive options, the likes of Braum and Poppy and Tarek, all really good at being able to counter-engage. These champions work really nicely into like Blind Nautilus, they work really nicely into the likes of Rel, and I think these picks can have really good value if you pick them in the right spot. They will struggle into enchanters, which is why I'd never really recommend blinding these picks, but pick them in the right spot and you would definitely get value out of having some of these champions within your pool. Moving up to the A tier then. So I'm going to lead off with Sona, who got buffed this patch. The buffs were really nice for Sona players who wanted to opt into different types of skill max variations. The Q max build, or 3 points Q, does have more potency to it now, and I think that is a more interactive way of playing Sona, so I'm glad they made a change like that. It enables Sona to have more fight back in certain lanes as well, and I think Sona as a champion has really benefited from that. It is probably the best kind of change which Sona could receive. I don't think Sona's bad by any means. She just requires more specific spots than some of the other options because of how squishy she can be in certain lanes. And to an extent, her damage is just not as consistent early on to the game, and you need like specific marksman pairings usually to get through those like pain points early on. And once you have a couple of points in Q, a couple of points in W, this champion can really flourish as an option. Spikes really nicely towards the end of her crescendo stacks, and then works really nicely as like a mid to late game option. She's not like an infinite scaler. I think she does kind of like hit like a point at like 2-3 items where she'll be like a relatively similar power throughout the game, but still is a great late game option. She can definitely output a huge amount of value with her movement speed, her like chords depending on which one you opt into. I think this champion does have a lot of value, but yeah, you do have to be careful when blinding it. I think there are champions and pairings which really struggle with Sona, so maybe not an OTP champion, but like opting into it every so often, I think this pick can work wonders. Other champions within the S tier are the likes of Lulu. She got nerfed this patch, and she lost a decent amount of durability early on to the game. The pick has had a W nerf, a Q nerf, the recent flat HP nerf. I believe she even had another nerf alongside all of these. I think it might have been to her W max up, rank up. But yeah, the pick's been here a couple of times, and every time it hasn't done enough in Riot size, but this seems to have done like what they wanted it to do. She sits as a low S tier option now. She's still a really good enchanter pick, and you could argue maybe she should be dropped onto the high end of the A tier. It'll be like good to see kind of what data she like spits out over the following patches. But right now, I still think this pick does have really good value in specific compositions. Her polymorph is an incredibly powerful ability, and yeah, Lulu, still a great option, does good damage early on to the game, pairs really nicely with specific champions, and great enchanter options still. Zyra, actually, I'll put Fresh here. Okay, so Fresh is like my niche pick at the moment. I think Fresh is really underrated. He's received a lot of buffs over time, specifically built around like his base damage and what you can get out the souls. I think this pick is probably underrated, if anything. Now, a lot of people originally, I say originally, like back along, just didn't want to play with a Fresh because oftentimes the champion can be really hard to pilot, and you feel like you get more value out of some of the other options. But right now, I think Fresh is in one of the best spots he's been in for a long time, and paired alongside the likes of a Trailblazer, I think this pick is a very strong option at the moment. So definitely don't sleep on Fresh. If you want to pick him up, I would recommend trying him at the moment because I think he's in a pretty strong spot. In the case of Zyra, she also sits towards the low end of the S tier. I think some of these low-end S-tier options could probably still be considered high A-tier options. She's got great damage within her kit. She's definitely more low elo skewed, where people won't play around your plants, won't deny your plants, will give you access to like good control over team fights. I think this pick can be really obnoxious in those situations, and having a form of hard CC in lane is very nice for a champion like Zyra, which is like more consistent with like Brand EQ, for example. But yeah, I think Zyra sits as a very solid S tier option at the moment. But yeah, could be comparable to some of the high H options. I think that is just the case with some of these S tier options. Towards the high end of the S tier, I still have the likes of Janna, Rel, Nami. In the case of Janna, I think she is very, very good at what she does, which gives her so much value. You want to bring her out as a counter pick. I think Blind Janna is quite bad, but if you pair her alongside a champion which requires once AD, you can utilize the East AD steroid against like champions, and you're playing against champions which want to engage into you, and you can utilize like your ultimate or your Q for self-peeling. I think this champion has so much value in those spots, and yeah, definitely still a very, very good pick at the moment. Rel is my recommended engage option still. I still think Rel is a great, great champion. She's definitely lost a lot of her popularity ever since she received those changes not too long ago, but those changes did work wonders for her. It gave her access to more more tools. It like shifted her tools around, if anything, but still very solid S tier option. In the case of Nami, she pairs with the most things out of the enchanter options, and I think that is what gives her the edge at the moment. Her flexibility as a champion, her E is an incredibly powerful ability paired alongside the likes of Karthus and Brand, but other just traditional marksmen like your Lucian. He's not that much of a traditional marksman, but even things like Jhin, for example, compare nicely alongside Banami, and even like your Jinxes, stuff like that, all work really nice with this champion. She gives movement speed, she gives slow and a damage amp. Her CC tools are not as reliable, but still pretty solid in what they can provide, and she has a built-in heal in her kit, which can provide her with damage as well. So Nami is my premier S tier pick at the moment. That being said, though, the premier pick of the patch goes to none other than the Fiddlesticks. I was hesitant to begin with. I was aware this existed for a couple of patches, and then last patch it began to pick up, and I bumped him up to the S tier, but the pick rate keeps going up, the ban rate keeps going up, the win rate is still holding up to what it was. And yeah, this champion is clearly proving to be very, very powerful. I've played against it more a couple of times now. I've scrimmed against this champion, and oh my god, it is obnoxious playing against a champion with a point-to-click 2.5 second fear, with a game-changing ultimate, with a build which gives him lots of I mean, durability for one, but also utility and like movement around the map. I think this pick has so much value at the moment, and yeah, I'd really recommend trying him before he gets nerfed, because I do presume the champion is about to get a pretty hefty set of changes, probably to push him back towards being a jungler. Whether they keep support Fiddlesticks alive, it'll be interesting to see, especially if like the popularity maintains. But right now, definitely the pick of the patch. There are loads of good options though in the support role at the moment, if you want to ban the likes of Fiddle and like play one of these other picks. And yeah, those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.